Good morning. I'm Richard Martin. I'm the Deputy Managing Editor of the Baltimore Banner, and it's my privilege to introduce our next session, a fireside chat about the Baltimore Peninsula and what it means for our city. Today's conference gives us an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into the area that was formerly known as Port Covington, a 235-acre project south of Interstate 95. At the Banner, we have watched with interest and covered this area's progress and transformation, including the commercial and residential spaces that are coming in, and the Baltimore Peninsula's relationship with the South Baltimore communities that it neighbors. Now, to our introductions. I'm pleased to welcome Kevin Plank, the founder and chief executive of Under Armour, MaryAnne Gilmartin, a builder and developer who is the founder and CEO of MAG Partners, one of the main developers of the project. Moderating this conversation will be my colleague, Hallie Miller, a reporter at the Baltimore Banner who has been covering this area for us. Please welcome them to the stage.
Thanks, Richard. We have a lot of ground to cover today, so we're going to jump right in. The word of the day is obviously impact, right? We're at Impact Maryland, so let's start there with that word. Tell us how impact connects to Baltimore Peninsula and the work that you all are doing there. You get to start, Mr. Plank, since you're closest.
Impact, I think, is...
Need your mic.
I actually asked for the microphone in lieu of a lavalier, so I thought I could do this hopefully at the end of the... Impact, I think, is... It's a great way to call for it, is that, Baltimore Peninsula, which we're here, and thank you for Banner for putting this on. Leadership is required in our city, and frankly, that's the role that I always felt. It was through proactively choosing to move my business from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore in 1998, getting started running with the business, being here, taking it public in 2005, and then around 2008, 2009, recognizing that the way that the consumer was going to be viewing companies, especially consumer-facing brands like an Under Armour, was what were we doing in our community? And it's where I looked out and I could see the trajectory of our business that had a lot of upside and growth. We crossed about $1 billion in 2010, and that was the moment where I started buying the property of around Baltimore Peninsula to create this vision. And the ability for impact on a city like Baltimore is something that doesn't happen just from general thinking, but it takes those sharp, acute moments of action to create something different, to change a trajectory. And we've all been, especially I do a lot of business outside of Baltimore, Maryland, and when you call and you mention the words Baltimore, we can all still roll our eyes. I'm saying the same half joke from 6 years ago of people mention The Wire. And we haven't put enough great conversation in their thinking to change that narrative yet. And what I just want to make sure that I get to say about this project for impact, and this is maybe a soliloquy, and I didn't have this planned, but I think it's important to sort of level set, is that I'd love for Baltimore to move beyond this being any one in particular person's project, is that we don't have enough big ideas. And I've been on the Greater Baltimore Committee for 20 years at this point. And I've watched every 3-year, 5-year, 10-year strategic plan come up and get dropped in a file cabinet someplace else. And I'm still waiting. And so part of that impetus for me was, how can we create something unique and different in our city? And that was something I had the means to be able to do with an anchor like an Under Armour, where it could be not taking anything from our public shareholders, but completely complementary, and more importantly, defining of what and who Under Armour stood for, a company that cared about its community. And that example is something that hopefully could be like a spark to light in other places as well. And that's what the vision of Baltimore Peninsula is really meant to be for us, is a place that hopefully Baltimore can be proud of, hopefully that people uncross their arms and aren't waiting for what's happening there versus, come on, root for it. Tell your friends, get them to come here. And if not that, then what? If not Baltimore Peninsula, I'm on board. I'll get into it. But I just think this is one of the opportunities that has a chance for Baltimore to really make a big difference. And that's why I'm really excited about this project and what it's going to mean.
So if I may say, as an outsider coming in, talking about impact, I'd say there are three ways, at least three ways, where meaningful impact is being brought to the city through Baltimore Peninsula. The first is sustainable, purposeful, committed partnerships, like with Kevin Plank and Goldman Sachs. You cannot do a project of this scope and ambition without partners. And so that partnership is very powerful, and for me was a condition of coming into the project, because that is what's going to make it successful. It's the impact of community, the fact that this project has one of the most remarkable and historical community benefits agreement. And just to be super specific, $134 million of contracts have been let to MWBE trades in the project since its inception, $134 million. 50% of any new job at the peninsula is from the city of Baltimore. 20% of the housing at Baltimore Peninsula is affordable. Those are meaningful impacts. Kevin Plank, through his family office, has invested $21 million already in the communities of South Baltimore, in their communities, not just within the footprint of this project. That is impact in motion. And finally, impact through innovation. Kevin's family office has funded Conscious Venture Labs. They do extraordinary work on the innovation front. Just giving an example of Hungry Harvest. This is a group of people that have saved 80 million pounds of fresh produce from going to waste, giving them to families in Baltimore that would otherwise not get access to fresh fruits and vegetables, and have served 80,000 households and have 80 people on staff. So those are extraordinary numbers, but that's impact at work through the vision that Kevin Plank had and really the mission of Baltimore Peninsula.
Ms. Gilmartin, it's your job to sell the city of Baltimore to clients both in Baltimore and outside of it. What are you finding is unique about the product, and how are people receiving that?
First, I'll say I'm proud to be here. I'm a student still of the city of Baltimore. I did not go to high school here. Kevin Plank is an amazing salesman, but I would say that it didn't take a lot to sell me on the city. I know real estate. I know community building. I am a builder. I am not interested in building buildings. My whole entire career, whether it's the New York Times building, Barclays Center in Brooklyn, is to build places, to impact skylines and ground planes and make communities better in urban locations. And so this project is a once-in-a-generational opportunity to do that. Coming to Baltimore, what I honestly don't understand is why there isn't a unified message around this city that talks about its assets. What I see is access to the waterfront. I see a community of people that want the city to be better and want to come together and rally for the greater good of Baltimore. An unbelievable workforce, educated, young, hip, happening, culture, food. These are the ingredients of a great place. So yes, I come in with all of the sort of understanding about what people say about Baltimore on the negative front. What I believe this city doesn't have is a unified message, like any marketing branding message, that is memorable, repeatable, and compelling. And the story is just simply not being told. So I'm up for the challenge. Kevin Plank is the greatest convener and flies the flag for Baltimore like nobody I've ever come across. But more of that has to happen, not just for Baltimore Peninsula, but for the city of Baltimore, because Baltimore Peninsula cannot manifest into its full self, full being, without Baltimore doing the same, because it's drafting in right behind Baltimore's image.
I think really, really well said, MaryAnne. And the ability to put this project, this is where I just want this crowd. This is the sophisticated crowd of Baltimore, and to know like the things that we can root or care for. And that is where I think the biggest thing that we were able to do was to compel a leader like MaryAnne Gilmartin, who's a Brooklyn native, at a New Yorker, who just knows what fast and big and speed and frankly great looks like, and being able to compel her to come here, to get Goldman Sachs to put hundreds of millions of dollars into our city, to assemble the team that we have, to now attract the leasing that we want. Like, this is what we want in our city, and this is, meant to be the positive of hopefully what a project like this can bring out.
And we know it's not easy. I just want to say, like, in my company motto is, if it's easy, we're not interested. And Kevin refers to me as a street fighter because, you know what? This is really hard work. This is the kind of work that you toil over day in and day out. So none of us expect it to be easy, but it is worth every bit of it.
And can you give us an update as to where you are with leasing, office, residential, how things are trending in those directions?
Yes, we have 25% of the commercial office space leased. You know that Jack Dwyer from CFG Bank is opening his headquarters first quarter of next year. He's building an unbelievable model for the workplace of the future. It's basically an adult playground. We have 25% of our retail out at lease or LOIs. We're hoping to make some really exciting announcements this fall. And our residences are approaching 50% leased. Finally, Roost, which is a beautiful extended stay product we have right inside of the first 5 buildings we've opened, had 98% occupancy last Wednesday. And this is an extraordinary thing. This is a place where you can stay for a night, a week, 6 months, or a year. It's a beautifully appointed product, and we welcome all of you to come down and see it. But it's really outperforming our expectations, again, because you go there, and again, as a New Yorker, you have access to the waterfront. You have unbelievable vistas. You've got open space. You've got the highest performing buildings in this market. It is a flight to quality. We all know that there's been major disruption in real estate. This project offers the highest performing real estate assets in this market.
And the residential?
The residential is
Mostly
approaching
leased?
50% occupancy. The affordable is obviously fully committed, which is a sign of the housing crisis in this country. So it's been well received. It's actually moving according to plan or above plan, and we're very pleased.
And this is where placemaking comes in, where it's not just what leases can we get out there, but the next thing we're working on is that we get the grocer in, you have the pharmacy, you have the pieces that people need in order to live. And so those are the pieces we're making sure that placemaking, this truly becomes a neighborhood, because what made Baltimore Peninsula compelling was the fact that it was bigger than the city. And frankly, the reason for that we wanted the name to anchor, of and what it was that it would be this place that you can frankly be in Columbia, you can live in DC. It's 10 or 15 minutes off of your commute versus, maybe being downtown. So that access is something that was super important, and why we are, definitely committed to driving this through, and, have amazing partners that are tied into this, from Goldman Sachs to the Bank of the Ozarks to M&T Bank. It's like, this is a community vision, and one we know is the type of thing, especially in the difficult leasing environment right now, that new product like this is one of the things that is actually really moving forward, and I think we can hang our hat on. So we got work to do, but we are in the fight.
I mean, it's 14 million square feet, which is the central business district in the Inner Harbor. So we're replicating the entire business district at the peninsula. But the goal, and Kevin and I talk about this a lot, is not to siphon off of the business community inside of Baltimore. It's to grow the pie. It's to invite companies and people to come and live, work, and play in Baltimore. And this project has the capacity really to lift up the entire city and give this city a lot more to love. And that's the ambition, and that's the goal. It's going to take time, but we're off to a very good start.
And that kind of gets back to the name itself, Baltimore Peninsula. I know you had some conversations leading up to the announcement of that name about a year ago. Can you talk about maybe why you chose that name, that kind of branding for this?
I want to be clear, is that number one, respect the history, respect Baltimore, love this town. But there's also places where we do need to be progressive and proactive. And frankly, this project was never meant to be a local project, meaning us shifting chairs around the deck versus saying, like, how do we attract a new audience here? We need a new tax base. We need to think about the West Coast companies, the Silicon Valley companies, where we can attract or compel for them. The companies based in New York that's saying we need a better quality of life, a more affordable for our employees that we have. And that's what this was meant to represent, is that when we are out there on the national stage, that we could be proud of Baltimore. And that reaction to it is hopefully something that people see why we wanted Baltimore in the name. Is a peninsula. It's a body of land surrounded by water on 3 sides. Check. It is a peninsula, and it's the Baltimore Peninsula as we want to market and tell this story and be proud of our city. To have Baltimore in the headline, that's what matters. And yes, we got a bunch of guff from people of, how can you do this? This is outrageous. I've never heard anybody care that much about words Port and Covington before in my life. And I'm not being disrespectful to the past. We're just saying it's a brand new day, and there's times where we just have to stop and just move forward. And I feel like that's what the name hopefully represents. But we want to attract the best brands, the best companies, and have them think, you know what, we need presence on the East Coast, we need to be in DC, maybe we want to move someplace else. How do we attract that and make it compelling? So Baltimore Peninsula is an incredible name.
And maybe we can talk about the latest of the headlines, which is the decision to sell a majority stake of Sagamore Spirit to Ilva Serono, a New Jersey, North American-based company. Can you talk a little bit about that deal and what maybe swayed them to move their North American headquarters down to Baltimore as part of that deal?
Well, it was actually part of the deal was they had to move their headquarters down here. So those that know or don't, but in 2011, 12, or 2010, we started this vision for building a rye whiskey company. What would that mean? And that really came out of that first parcel where the Sagamore Spirit Distillery is built today. It was a 3-acre parcel that I bought at auction, which sort of, lit up this idea for what about if we bought the rest of this space, if we could build, this new canvas of what Baltimore is and should be, of taking the best of what is the heritage and history and culture and DNA of this incredible urban destination that's Baltimore, and what if we gave it, a new skin and a new look to it, and that's where Sagamore Spirit was meant to be that first spark. If you've ever heard me talk before, you've heard me say, like, some people can rub sticks, some people can scratch rocks. I like little tiny sparks, and then being able to pour gasoline on top of them and make it hot. That's what fires need. And that distillery was, of the 230-plus acres of land that looked like much land on the eastern seaboard when you drive through Philly and these other places of this port industrial in need of remediation. And the purpose of that distillery was so important of having a go-forward building business. And I want to compliment the team that helped build it, and Brian Tracy and Drew Thorne and Ryan and the whole team that we had that built this incredible business. And then frankly, it started with people that weren't really native to building whiskey, but part of my thought was, you make the first product, it's in the barrel for 4 years, you got time to figure this business out. So from 2012 to 2016, before we opened the distillery, it was really getting up to speed with the business. And then we were able to get a great purchase. We've had a 13x multiple on the business, which is like one of the highs. And one of the requirements we made for this Ilva Serono, they make Amaretto di Sarno square bottle. If you've seen that in restaurants before, maybe an Italian restaurant, got the square knob on the top. But getting them to come here, one of the requirements was that they were going to move their North American headquarters for Ilva Serono to Baltimore Peninsula. And so that's where bringing that fame, taking over that distillery, and being able to take that mission, and move forward with it. And again, we still own, 15-ish, 20% of that business. So we're still involved in it. But we have every vested interest for it to do well going forward. But it's really the kind of anchor of, we can start with that first spark. And now we have professionals coming in, bringing their salespeople, their team, everyone coming here to Baltimore Peninsula to be the anchor for it. And more importantly, being able to take that business, ensure that business is successful, selling Maryland rye, which is part of the story that I hope built some pride for our city, for our state, for our region. And again, with people that actually know how to do it.
I'm watching the clock. I think we have time for about one more. I wanted to ask what is next for Kevin Plank, who I think we all kind of think about as somebody who there's always a what's next for. And can you say what's next for Under Armour as well as its presence in Baltimore, as far as its presence in the region?
Well, thank you for that. I think, frankly, a lot of it is what's next for me is understanding what's important. And in our offices we keep signs, and one of them says, keep the main thing the main thing. Part of what I'd like to do is I'd like to be hyper-focused. I've learned enough of trying different things to know that it's really hard to be good at just one thing. And I'm fortunate that I've got interests and have the capacity to be able to have a couple, 2 or 3 different canvases. And with the distillery, the whiskey business now going into really capable leadership that can run that, and it never, frankly, occupied a large portion of my time. I'm really happy to have that in professional hands that can do the best with the business. This is really allowing me to zero in and focus. Focus on this project, but of course, as the executive chairman and brand chief at Under Armour, be able to focus there is incredibly important too, and help my partner, Stephanie Lenartz, who's now just a little more than 7 months in the job as CEO, who joined us from Marriott and came from Bethesda to Baltimore, is doing a terrific job. But that is what I want to do is, I've always described in my office, I keep these whiteboards and we write inspiration for the company. It becomes a culture, overpromise and deliver, dictate the tempo, walk with a purpose. But at the center always reads the same things. It says, whatever you do, don't forget to sell shirts and shoes. So that's one thing that I know the greatest gift that I can ensure happens for Baltimore is a really healthy Under Armour, ensuring that happens, a really happy team, hopefully a great place to convene with Under Armour being at the tip of that Baltimore Peninsula and being so important. But yeah, I'd love to build a great brand, and I'd love to help work on the neighborhood surrounding where we do that, both in Baltimore Peninsula as well as the other 6 neighborhoods that we have as our partners.
And can we say what's next for Baltimore Peninsula at this point?
This is 14 million square feet, so this will be something I think we're going to be talking about not for months but for years. The full manifestation of the project is something extraordinary. I think it's a model for how public and private industries come together and do great things for communities. And so there's a lot riding on it because this is not a collection of buildings. This is a very big idea, and it's a model for other cities. So we take it very seriously, and I think that there'll be a lot of interesting and exciting things coming out of the peninsula, but it's going to happen over time. It requires at once an unbelievable sense of urgency and on some level patience, because we're doing something so big and so important. So I'm in.
Opening soon, Clyde's group is opening?
Yeah, so imagine again that Clyde's is coming from DC, and we'll have a beautiful perch on the waterfront in the first quarter of 2024 with an outdoor restaurant, and that'll be one of the things we can expect rolling into next year. Again, CFG Bank is opening, and more people are moving there. We also signed a partnership with Volo. So Volo is an unbelievable sports franchise in Baltimore, 60,000 members, and people will be playing pickleball, volleyball, bocce on our fields, and we will be taking the Baltimore Sun building down to create, again, a visual connection where 46 million people that drive by the project will have really unfettered views of the great work that is happening at Baltimore Peninsula.
Well, thank you all so much. I think we're just about out of time. Thanks for joining us, and have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Thanks, Hallie.
Thank you all.